Okay, hello everybody, good afternoon. Okay, now I know I'm the last speaker and I stand right between you and the end of today's session. All right, now I want to do this rather informally, okay, so that I can better engage with you, all right? Okay, so as earlier on been introduced, my name is Thomas Wan, right? Okay, I'm actually the course director with the International Compliance Association. Okay, now today's topic, right? We shall be touching on. Hang on. Okay, now this is actually my presentation agenda, right? Okay, as you can see over here, now quite a number of things are actually moving on the ground. For money services business, what do you guys think? Are things, the same or is it rather boring? What do you guys think? Okay, now we are actually living in an era of change, right? And along with this change, you find that the regulators, Bank Negara, they are also changing, right? So what are some of the things that we should be looking out for? What is Bank Negara's expectation, more importantly, correct? Now with all this that's going on, okay, what might be the impact for your firm? All right, I know some of you are directors, okay? Some of you are compliance officer, right? So how is it going to impact you? Okay? Now, as you can see here on the slide, I've also emphasized on the word competency training. So what's that? Okay, and how competency training might help us in moving forward. Okay, so this is the agenda which I have for my presentation today. Okay, now to begin with, all right, now when we talk about the money services businesses, okay, AML risk is always there, right? Okay, especially for those of you who are involved in, the direct remittance of monies, right? And there's a good reason why you find that wire remittances, okay, they are considered to be what? Highly vulnerable, correct? In terms of AML, CFT risk. Again, these are, the criteria which regulators actually would judge a certain product or service to see whether it's high risk or not, right? Okay, so now, as you can see, money services, the problem with money services is that once money gets out of the door, especially across to another country, yeah, high chances are what? High chances that these funds are not going to be recoverable. Okay, so that's why you find that by and large, okay, in most jurisdictions, most regulators would rate money services to be, high risk, right? Okay, now what about the money services business over here in Malaysia? How are we faring in terms of, the fight against money laundering and terrorism financing? Very interesting, okay. In the next slide as well, right? Okay, I've got some figures. Now, rather surprisingly, as you can see over here, okay. Now, in Malaysia, in terms of the number of STR, Suspicious Transactions Report, which has been filed by the Mamsbs, you realize that, wow, we are nearly on par with the banks, correct or not? Now, that is actually good news, okay? And you find that, by and large, I would say, okay, it's all due to the good efforts being done by the Mamsb, right? Okay, by the association in trying to improve the level of AML CFT training, right? Okay, now I won't really go through, each and every one, right? But just to show you a comparative notes to see where we are together as a sector, as an industry, right? Now, interesting, some of you might be asking, right, what does this slide got to do with me? Okay, now, you find that when it comes to money laundering, terrorism financing, okay, now, we can never operate in isolation. The fight against money launderers and criminals, terrorists, okay, we have to come together collectively as, right, as the entire financial services sector, yeah, to overcome the problem. Okay, so what I'm trying to say over here is that you guys, yeah, are doing very well, right? Okay. Now, again, I have some comparative figures. If you take a look at Singapore, where I'm from, I'm from Singapore, by the way, okay? Now, and as well as Hong Kong, okay? Now, you find that, by and large, right, in fact, if you were to go by numbers alone, in terms of the number of STRs, the number of STR being filed by you guys have actually far superseded than that compared to Singapore and Hong Kong. Amazing, isn't it? Right? So should we give a round of applause in terms of the good work which has been done? Okay, right? Now, nevertheless, okay, we should never rest on our laurels, because you find that money launderers these days, they are becoming what? Smarter and smarter. Again, apart from the ever-evolving threat from criminals and terrorists, you find that in terms of regulation, now, is the industry very quiet in that aspect? Now, I'm sure you guys, right, the reason why you're here, I would say, would largely be because, okay, of the last point over here, right? Okay, this came out fairly recently, correct or not? Okay, requirements for the Mamsb compliance officer to obtain certification or accreditation. It just came out just probably around like 1 or 2 weeks ago, by Bank Negara, right? Okay, so again, you find that these days, in terms of regulation, some of you, I know you guys are complaining, right? Hey, how come we are seeing so many regulations, correct? Yeah, more and more demand being placed on us and all that, right? Okay, now, we have actually come quite a long way, as you can see on my slide over here. Over the last 5 years, these are some of the key regulations, okay? You should be more familiar than me, right, on all this. So I won't really go through each and every one, right? But again, you find that there's a good reason. There's a good reason why the regulator is doing so, right? Now, so what do you think? Moving forward, are there going to be less regulations or more regulations? More? Okay. Now, very interesting, right? Because if you look at this, now this little diagram which I have over here, right? Now, you find that regulations, especially regulations for the financial services, very often it is closely linked to the stage of development for a particular country or jurisdiction. All right? Now, as you can see, right, when we first started at the very bottom, right, we have things like, for example, your prudential requirements. You have that as well, correct or not? Yeah, okay. You need to meet certain minimum capital standards in order for you to start a money services business and all that, right? Now, again, as we move up along the curve, you will hear things like, for example, the threshold requirement, 3,000 ringgit, correct? You need to file an STR, correct? Yeah? Okay, now this is what we call a rules-based kind of regulation. Okay? Yeah, in other words, okay, the regulators are being, very specific. Yeah? Telling you 3,000, means 3,000, right? Okay. Now, you find that in actual practice, regulators make use of what we call a combination of principle-based plus rules-based. Okay. Now, some of you might be hearing this for the first time, right? But over here in Malaysia, if you go to Bank Negara's website to have a look, right, it will tell you, okay, Bank Negara uses what we call an enhanced principle-based, right, regulatory supervision approach to financial institution in Malaysia. Now, what do we mean by that? Enhanced principle-based. Okay, you find that, yeah, these days with a lot of guidelines being given out, right, okay, they tend to be rather high level. It is only, on areas whereby Bank Negara perceive, to be of much higher risk, then you realize that they tend to be more specific. So this is what we call enhanced principle base. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, over here, as you can see in my earlier slide, in terms of the development of regulations for Malaysia, we are slowly moving into what we call an outcome-based kind of regulation. Now, what do we mean by that, outcome-based? Okay, now, you find that jurisdiction like the UK, okay, the British regulators, these days they tend to talk about things like what? Culture, competency, okay, fit and properness, risk assessment. Now, do all these terms ring a bell to you guys? Sounds familiar, correct? Sorry? Okay, so in other words, a very, very good answer. We are moving along that direction. Okay? If you were to ask me, where do I think that Malaysia is in terms of regulatory development? Now, where do you guys think? Where are we? At the top? Now, outcome-based comes along with it a lot of challenges. Okay, one of the greatest challenges, right, when we talk about outcome-based kind of regulation, I always tell my class, I say, remember Nike's advertisement? Just do it. Okay, now again, it's quite scary right now because if the Malaysian regulator is moving towards that direction, right, outcome-based, in other words, you got to do it. But one of the greatest challenge for outcome-based regulation, you find that you need to really sit down, right, with the regulators and to talk things out, okay, to discuss what, all right, in the eyes of the regulator, right, okay, do they deem, right, to be, the desired outcome that they want to achieve. Now, there's a lot of so-called desired outcome, right, that regulators want to achieve, which I will share with you in the next couple of slides, okay? But you find that it is very challenging because things like, for example, in the area of money laundering and terrorism financing, I can tell you, okay, the outcome which the regulator is looking at is zero tolerance. Sorry? What do you guys think? Well, definitely we are ahead of, China, India, right? Japan is very unique because Japan, in terms of regulation, they are rather isolated, right? So where is Malaysia? I want to hear from you. Malaysia is somewhere, okay? Now this is the answer, right? If you were to ask me, right? Okay.
The reasoning given, correct or not? There's one of the reason, lah. Okay,
Yes.
and then
in Malaysia, all money changes, any transaction, any amount of transaction, we buy $1, all of us give receipt. I go to Singapore and Hong Kong, no.
Okay.
Okay, there's one second reason. Correct or not?
Okay. Like what I said earlier on, right? If you look at the number of STR which has been filed, honestly, I think Malaysia, right? For you guys, you have been doing a fantastic job. I'm not kidding, right? You compare to Singapore and Hong Kong in terms of number, huh? Okay, we are always
Can I
vigilant,
have some
right?
of my opinion?
Okay. Now, but the interesting thing.
Can I
Yes,
have some of my
sorry, yep.
opinions? So, what do you think is Malaysia's standing? I mean, among the 5 listed here.
Malaysia, I would say, is just a tad behind Singapore. But definitely, okay, these days are exceeding even, right, okay, above Australia, right? But
Thomas, sorry, do you mean for MSB or you're talking about general in terms of financial services? Which one do you mean? Regulations?
in general, including MSB, I would say.
So it's for financial services as a whole?
Yes.
The regulatory environment, not specific to MSB, right?
Yes,
Okay.
but very interesting because if you backtrack a little bit, okay, on the slides over here, right? Now, as you can see, we have clearly moved away from things like your prudential requirements. We have moved into things like risk management, risk controls, okay, competency-based training, yeah, national risk assessment, AML risk and all that, right? Yeah. So we are moving, in other words, correct or not? Things are changing, okay? Now, again, it is very important, you know, for the industry as well as the compliance officer to know where we are heading, the general direction, in terms of regulation, right? Okay?
Yeah, Thomas,
Yes.
I think my opinion is, if you said Malaysia is a little bit behind Singapore and Hong Kong or
Yep.
UK, right? I'm not quite agree with that because my company, we have a license in Singapore, we have license in UK.
Okay.
So we also have license in Malaysia. So in terms of the compliance requirements, as a compliance officer, I feel that Malaysia is the most headache for me because the requirements is so much as compared to UK and Singapore. Because Singapore, in terms of reporting requirement, the enforcement of the RBA, we are talking about RBA, but RBA in Singapore is not enforced. And a compliance officer is not really mandatory if you read their requirement. But Malaysia is yes. So Singapore, if you don't have a compliance officer, the senior officer will be responsible. I think this is one of the requirements. And in Hong Kong,
yes,
in Hong Kong,
I would agree. Because why? Because different country regulators, right, they also use a risk-based approach, right, to determine which are the sector that they should be working on first.
but it's whether it's mandatory or enforced. Singapore and UK is actually not really enforced. You must have this. This is the minimum requirement.
Oh.
It's just that, yes, it's a requirement in terms of in the
Yep.
in the guideline, but it's up to you how you want to define your risk. It's up to you. But when anything happen, they come to you. You must be able to answer why you do this. So,
Yes.
but Malaysia is too many requirements, too many reportings, and the line by line reporting as compared to Singapore is only quarterly and summary.
Thomas, doesn't that also play into the fact of whether they are on a registration regime or licensing regime? I think UK is on a registration regime, whereas
Yes.
we are on a licensing regime. So you can't actually compare apple to apple because the regulatory framework will
and
be a bit
also
different.
from a national risk assessment perspective. Now, very interesting because let's talk on AML first, because as most of you are aware, right, Malaysia only became a full member of FATF in February 2016. Okay, it has been an observer. So that's why when I first started, to teach in Malaysia, it was simply called AMLA, right? Then become AMLA FA. Then these days become AMLA FA PUA. Okay, so getting longer and longer, right? Okay, now, very interesting because different regulators approach the entire financial services differently. If you compare to UK, Singapore and Hong Kong, now these are three major financial centers, especially for banking, correct? Yeah, so that's why it's a natural thing for the regulators, like the British regulators, to focus on the banks first. Okay, you can read in the news, correct or not? Big banks, they got hit, big fines and all that, billions of dollars. HSBC, right? Standard Chartered, they have been hit, right? Okay, now for Malaysia, each country, what I'm trying to say is each country is unique. So Malaysia, right? FedF has actually identified, the cash-intensive nature of money services business in Malaysia to be an area of concern. So that's why you find that when it comes to regulation, right? Okay, regulations has been ramped up. Okay, I hope I answer your question, right? Okay, right? It's just different priorities from the perspective of the regulators. Huh? Okay. Now, so nevertheless, we are moving towards that outcome-based, right? Culture, behavior, and things like that. So how do you measure conduct? The conduct, right, of the firm, of individuals. Now, that's the next big challenge coming along your way, right? So think about it, right? Okay? Now, again, this is not helped by the fact that there are other macro factors that's coming into play as well. Okay? We are living in an age of disruption, fintech, right? That's why these days Bank Negara has come out with guidelines, right? Okay, and they make mention of this term called what? Sandboxing. So what do we mean by sandboxing and all that, right? Okay, but for the MSBs, you realize that we are not spared, okay, from all this disruption that's going on in the greater financial services industry, right? Now, again, along with all these technological advances, changes, you realize that, hey, okay, if we were to adopt that, now some of you, I'm sure, right, okay, you have mobile apps and all that, right? Yeah. So again, if you were to do that, what might be some of the regulatory requirements? What might be some of the challenges? What might be some of the compliance risks that you have to be mindful of? Right? Again, as you can see, right, these days we are not talking about, people even coming at all, perhaps, to the shop front or what, right? They can actually do it via the mobile apps, correct? They can activate payments directly to the beneficiary. So how, right? Okay. Now the fourth bullet point is very interesting. Again, if you think that regulators won't hit MSBs with big fine, then we might be wrong. I'm sure you guys have heard about the news, right? Western Union, okay? No kidding, right? 586 million. And they have to enter into what we call a deferred prosecution agreement. Now, what happens in a deferred prosecution agreement is that the firm, right, apart from paying the fine, you have to agree to a certain set of things that you need to do, right, to rectify over a period of time, right? If the firm fails to do that, right, okay, the directors who are involved, they could be criminally prosecuted, right? So it's a very serious form of sanction, right? Okay, which regulators can melt out, right? Okay. Now these days you realize that apart from it, we also have to protect the system, from terrorists, from rogue states like North Korea and all that. Our dear friend Mr. Kim, okay, right? Now, the last part is very interesting as well. Financial crime, fraud and financial crime. Okay, how many of you are aware that tax evasion has been listed as a predicate offense under the AMLA FAPOA? Okay, good. Okay, but then again, right, if you were to refer to the second schedule of the AMLA Fatwa, you realize that the list of predicate offences these days is becoming more and more, okay? And it also includes, right, crimes of what we call, white-collar crimes, right? Yeah, financial crime nature, in other words. So again, how can we tell, right? If the person comes to you, this money could be tainted due to the financial crime nature, right? Again, these are some challenges. Okay? So with all these things that's going on, right? Challenges, risks, and all that. So how is Bank Negara perceiving things? What are some of the regulatory expectations that we're looking at, right? Okay, I've got the words bold. First thing, right? There's a need for us to what? Raise the competency standards. Okay, we are looking at different type of risks. When we talk about compliance, okay, you find that now compliance. What happened in Malaysia was that around like 6 years ago, it started with AML CFT, right? And I always tell people, I say, compliance is more than your AML CFT these days. Okay? It's definitely more, right? Yeah, there's a lot of other things that you need to consider as well, right? Now we'll come on to that, right? Okay, so there's a need, right, to raise the professional standards as well as to improve the overall quality of compliance across the firm, across the industry. Okay, now, in fact, all this, you can get it from Bank Negara's website. Okay, nothing magical. I'm just trying to read, right, between the lines of the regulators and try to see, what they are looking at, right? Okay, now, the second point would be, well, your AML CFT risk, okay? But more importantly, would be the second one, right? The second set of words which has been highlighted, your AML measures. Now, when we talk about AML measures, what we are trying to say is that, do you have the necessary framework, systems, and controls in place to mitigate your AML risk? Now, very interesting because in university, right, over at ICA, we use what we call a plagiarism checker. So if you were to run a document, right, through it, right, it will tell you, okay, this particular document is copied from where and all that, right? Okay. Now, don't be surprised that a number of policies, if you were to run it by the plagiarism checker, right, you will reflect out that this is probably being copied, right, somewhere from Bank Negara's website or what. Now, these days, just to share with you, because I teach in the Asia Pacific region as well. Now, these days in Hong Kong and in Singapore, when the regulators, when they walk into your firm, right, okay, now apart from asking to take a look at your policies and procedures, they would also ask, can you show me that you have done, a risk assessment before, coming out with your policy and procedure? Now, okay, now the shocking thing is, okay, in fact, quite a number of head of compliance, they were scratching their head, right? Yeah, what do you mean by risk assessment, right? We have our policy, right? Okay, but the regulators are saying, hey, look, your policy, okay, copying from some website or what, right? Okay, it's not adequate. You have not really considered the risk that your firm is actually facing in crafting those policies, right? Okay, so again, expectations have changed, and the regulators, global regulators, they would expect firms these days to be able to design relevant, okay, and appropriate systems and controls to mitigate all these AML risks. Right? Now, just sidetrack a little to these days for the banking sector, banks are being fined for what? For lack of monitoring and testing of internal controls. Yeah? So again, regulators have moved away from, the design of framework, controls, policies, procedure into looking at what? Monitoring and testing of controls. Just to share. Okay? Now, the third point is, of course, training. Okay? You can have the best-in-class transaction monitoring system. Yeah, but, it is nothing, right? When an alert flag, gets flagged out, okay, you still need that human touch to actually look at, what's the alert about, right? Yeah, what are we seeing here? Okay, so training is very, very important, especially when we move towards in the direction of, outcome-based kind of regulation, right? Okay, feel free to ask any question. Should you have any questions on this? Okay. Now, last but not least, you find that, we need these days for the, especially those of you who are compliance officers, you need to be what? Competent and well qualified. Okay. In other words, fit and proper. Okay. Now, very interesting. I was having a discussion earlier on during lunch. All right. Now, you find that over in UK, I would say that's a milestone case. Okay. UK actually make it publicly known, right? They have actually decided not to approve certain compliance officer from holding that particular position, on their website. Okay. In UK, in the banking space, in the insurance space, they have implemented what we call the senior managers regime, right? So board of directors, senior management staff, okay, who holds what they call senior management function, right? These days you need to be fit and proper. Okay? Now, along with it, you find that one of the key requirements for fit and properness is getting the qualification, necessary qualification. Okay? So again, this are, the writing is on the wall, right? Okay. Now again, why? Why are we seeing more and more, new regulations and things like that, right? It's very interesting because if you look at the wordings in black, okay, now this tends to be the so-called regulatory objective of most regulators in the past. If you go to Bank Negara's website, you can also find, the objective of Bank Negara along, the lines, right, of those few keywords, like for example, market confidence, market stability, and all that, etc. Right? But these days, because of the evolving macro environment, the advancement of technology, you realize that perhaps, okay, the words in blue, these are some of the regulatory objectives. All right? Okay. Now, the next thing which I would like to highlight to you guys, right, is that, with all these compliance risks, vulnerabilities, etc., right? Now, again, all these new regulations, etc., right, you find that there's a magnitude of risks that your firm, the compliance officer, faces. Okay? And like what I said earlier, it's definitely more than AML CFT, especially for compliance officer, right? Yeah. These days you have to look at things like, ethical risk, conduct risk, okay? Personal liabilities as well. Over in Hong Kong, now Hong Kong is one of the leading regulators in Asia, right? Recently, okay, there have been a couple of cases whereby the compliance officer has been held to task for not, performing his or her work well. Yeah? So you're looking at personal liabilities these days, okay? Now, again, against the backdrop of all these risks, what's the demand that's been placed on the compliance role and function? These days, if you look at, the compliance officer, we can akin the compliance officer to be somewhat like what? A Superman, correct? What do you guys, some of you, right? I know there are a number of Supermen and Superwomen in the in the crowd today, right? You find that more and more work, correct or not? Demands being placed on you, okay? Now, again, you find that the role of the compliance officer these days have changed. Like what I have stressed earlier on, more than AML CFT, okay? You also have to look at things like financial crime prevention. How do you deter fraud, for example? Okay? You also have to be a trusted business advisor. What if your firm want to set up, a branch, let's say, in Thailand, for example, right? What are the laws and regulations that you need to comply with? Okay? Now, you also have to be a champion, a leader for governance. You need to set all the structure, right? Okay? Legal arrangement, etc., in place, right? And make sure that, all these are being followed and being complied by people. Okay? Now, last but not least, you find that the role of the compliance officer has also evolved into somewhat to be that of an educator as well. The mindset, the hearts and mind of your staff are very, very important. You need to change the culture, right, and mindset. Okay? So, again, this is a very good example. In fact, these two person, right, on the left, they are actually our graduates. They graduated from the diploma program, right, in AML CFT over in Singapore, right, and they have been commended by the Singapore police, for their work in trying to deter all these fraudulent scams. Now these days, I believe over here in Malaysia, you also receive certain phone calls and things like that, correct or not? Yeah? Okay, targeting what we call vulnerable customers, old folks especially, right? Okay, so again, how good are your staff in trying to, being able to detect fraud, to prevent financial crime, right? So that's something that we need to think, right? Okay, now, you find that earlier on in Bank Negara's guidelines, right? Okay, Bank Negara also talk about, these days you have to make risk assessment, yeah? Okay, so what do we mean by all that, right? Okay, in other words, what Bank Negara is trying to say that, with all these risks, challenges that's arising, do you have a proper compliance risk assessment framework in place to mitigate all these risks? Okay? Now, I shan't really go into that because that is actually, what we teach in our program, right? And I'll share with you shortly, right? What are the programs that we have, all right? Okay. So, again, these are some of the topical areas that we have to consider when it comes to compliance. Not just AML, CFT, but things like fit and properness, data protection, okay? If, with the increased use of mobile, internet, right, remittances and all that, right, yeah? So how do you protect, how do you comply with, the Data Protection Act, right? Okay? Outsourcing, your technology risk management. How do you manage your outsourcing risk? Right? Okay, etc. Okay? Now, in order for firms to manage all these compliance risks, okay, you will need tools to help you to do so. Okay? Now, I've been talking about, risk assessment and all that, right? So, okay, so how does it look like? Okay, maybe you want me to show this slide? Okay. Right? Okay, now again, these are some of the tools, right? Everything, in a very simplified nutshell. Okay? Yeah, so how do you make use of them, right? Now, just to give you an idea how some of these tools might look like, okay, I would just show you, okay, this is what we call a risk assessment register. Now, the concept of risk assessment or risk-based approach can actually be applied to your product services, your workflow processes, okay, etc., right, okay. It's a very useful tool, right? Okay, so in our program, we will actually walk candidates through, right? Okay, as to how to perform actual risk assessment, yeah, based on workplace example, okay? Monitoring and testing. So how do you conduct field tests to see whatever procedures that you have put into place, whatever controls that you have put into place that people are complying with? Are these controls working effectively as they should have? Right? How effective are they? Right? So again, this is a very useful template, right? That again we'll teach our candidates in our class, right? Okay. Now, more importantly, you realize that these days, with all these risks and then especially compliance risks, right? You realize that the stand by Bank Negara these days is that what? The compliance officer, okay, you can no longer sort of act in a very passive manner. The expectation by regulators, in fact, not just Bank Negara, but globally have changed, okay? They are expecting, firms, compliance officer to be more proactive, to get ahead in terms of compliance issue. So gone are the days, whereby you can just say, Bank Negara never tell us to do this, right? Yeah, but then you're aware of certain risks, correct or not? Yeah? Okay, so you need to be managing your risk, in other words, very proactively these days. Right? So again, this is a big paradigm shift by regulators. Okay? Now, you find that very interesting statement, right? Being said by Tan Sri, right? Datuk Muhammad Ibrahim, right? Okay, very recently, right? Now, you find that getting the right qualification, the right professional qualification is very, very important, right? And you find that Tan Sri Muhammad Ibrahim, he actually strongly endorsed the program, right? Which is being offered by ICA in conjunction with AICB. Okay. Again, some of you may ask, right? So what's unique about the AICB program together with ICA? Right? What's so unique about the program? Okay. Now, it started like 6 years ago, right? Yeah. Together with Kong, the Compliance Officer Networking Group over here in Malaysia, right? Now, what happened is that the program, all right, was being brought over, right? It is largely being mapped to the UK occupational standards. Okay, it is a very unique program in a way that it is also contextualized for Malaysia's context. Okay, and when people walk away, right, or rather graduate from our program, you find that you get dual awards. One from AICB, the other one would actually be ICA and the University of Manchester. Okay, it's a very unique, right, qualification, right? Now, let's move on to look a little bit more at our program, okay? Now, the programs that we have in Malaysia, we have 2 tracks. One for AML CFT. Now, the other one is actually for regulatory compliance. And as you can see, there are 3 levels, Okay, level 1 is actually the foundational stage. Yeah, level 2 is for people with perhaps less than 3 years of experience, or at least 3 years of experience. Okay, level 2 is more interesting. Level 2 actually looks at you know, the application of all the understanding foundational knowledge that you can get, right? Okay. Now, level 3 would be for advanced practitioners. Again, you find that at level 3, the emphasis on candidates is actually on strategic thinking. Now, some of you earlier on have asked, you know, how do our programs map together with perhaps the FAA standards that, you know, some of you might have attained, right? Okay. Now, you realize that our level 1 program actually would map with level 4 under the FAA standards, right? And similarly for level 2 and level 3, right? Okay, which will correspond to 5 and 6 respectively. Now, our program is unique in a way that you find that it is a combination of, you know, workshop, okay, assignment, as well as exam, okay, written exams, right? And also perhaps at the higher level 3 level with things like reflective journal and work-based portfolio. All right? Okay. Now, the interesting part about our program is that apart from academic qualification, you realize that we also look at what? The level of experience that the candidate has. Okay? Now, these days, in a lot of jurisdictions, we have actually moved on from so-called the academic kind of road for training, okay, into what we call competency-based training, right? Now, as part of competency-based training, you realize that, experience do count, yeah? Okay, so there are, in other words, different ways, yeah, to get on board to our program. So we also look at experience as a road of entry as well, okay? Now, again, why is it important to get a qualification from us? Okay, now you find that our programs, we use workshop-based kind of delivery, right? Okay, largely because of the emphasis on competency-based learning. Okay, in other words, we will teach candidates to be hands-on. And I think it's very, very important. Why do you guys think, why do we need to be hands-on for AML, CFT, as well as compliance? Especially, okay, now let's look at AML, CFT, right? You realize that, you know, when it comes to, say, things like, for example, the 3 stages of money laundering, people can name me, right? Placement, layering, and integration. But you'll be quite surprised, okay, when it comes to a real case, okay, and you turn around, right, and you ask the person, hey, so what is the criminal trying to do over here? Is the criminal trying to layer money or integrate money, right? How do you tie all these concepts and apply it to a real case, right? Now, that is what we mean by competency-based training, right? And that is the unique feature about our program, right? We train people to become competent compliance officer, okay? Now, on top of that, okay, you find that upon passing our level 2 program, okay, you are eligible to apply to become a full-fledged professional member of the ICA, right? Now, very useful membership, okay, because along with that, you realize that you'll be given access to the members portal, and there's a lot of information out there, a lot of materials that will help candidates to further develop in terms of CBD hours and all that, professional developments, okay? right? Now, last but not least, you find that, for employers, this is something that you can actually show to the regulator, right? Saying that, hey, your staff, especially your compliance officer, they are well equipped to deal with all these demands being placed on the compliance function, right? Now, last but not least, for individuals, okay, you find that this is a very good way, right, of a career progression. Now, University of Manchester. Now, if I were to ask you, right, name me the top British university, which one would you tell me? Oxford, Cambridge. Okay. London. There's a couple of universities in London. So, University of London, perhaps. Okay. LSE. Yep. Okay. London School of Economics. Now, you find that University of Manchester, okay, is commonly named, all right, as one of the top 10 universities in the UK. Now, just to share with you, I myself, I went through, all these qualification programs about 12 years ago. Okay, in fact, in Asia, right, I was amongst the very pioneer batch of compliance officer to have undergone all these qualification program, right? Okay. Now, one of the reasons why I did so, okay, with ICA is because of the association with the University of Manchester. Okay. For those of you who are academically inclined or serious enough, right? Okay, you find that apart from gaining a professional qualification from ICA, University of Manchester, you can actually these days move on to do a full-fledged master's degree for compliance, okay, or financial crime with the University of Manchester and the University of Law as well over in the UK. Okay, now this is very interesting because the role of the compliance officer I can share with you guys. These days the role, right, of a compliance officer has somewhat gained more formal recognition, okay, in terms of it being a profession, right? So that's why you find that these days you can actually do a full-fledged master's degree, right? So, as you can see, right, with all that's going on, so what must we do? Okay, now, preparation is key these days, okay? Do not wait, till the regulators come to you, right? Yeah. Okay, before, or rather wait before the regulator, comes very hard on you and tell you to do something. Try to stay ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, all right? Okay? Now, you find that at the heart of all this, to deal with all these challenges, okay, perhaps quality staff training, more importantly, competency-based training would be the key. Okay? I've more or less come to the end, right, of my presentation. Now, for those of you who are interested, okay, to find out a little bit more, okay, you can actually approach our staff outside. Now, for your info, okay, we run 2 intakes per year. Okay, as you can see, right, these are our usual intake period, okay, for the level 1 and level 2 program as well as level 3 program, right? So, usually for the first intake, right, okay, the program is run in the January-February period. For the second intake, it will be in July and August. Okay? Now, rather than me going through all these slides, okay, now I would like to hear from you guys. Any questions that you perhaps like to raise? And I have Rajesh together with me, right, perhaps to take some answers from the audience. Yep. Oh, the fees, is it? Okay.
Okay. The fees for this course for certification or foundation level is approximately about 6,000 plus, inclusive of GST. For advanced certification, which is the intermediate level, it's about 8,500, inclusive of GST. And the expert or third level is about 10,000 ringgit, all in ringgit Malaysia, inclusive of GST.
So for
Yeah.
our accreditation purposes, level 1.
Yeah, for the BNM requirement, it is the foundation level, which is approximately about 6,000 plus.
You mentioned something about one block, what is it? One block times 2 days workshop. What do you mean? Can you just clarify that?
Oh, okay. Now, this is the general format of our program, right? Okay. Now, again, you find that there will be what we call block teaching, right? Block teaching workshops, whereby we have tutors. Okay. Now, these tutors they comprise of both academic as well as very senior practitioners to sort of go through the course materials. More importantly, right, the exercises, the tasks, etc. Right, for competency-based training together with the candidates.
Is this face to face?
Yes, including risk-based approach. Yeah. Okay. Oh, face-to-face. Yes, face-to-face workshop. Yes.
So how many days do we spend with the tutors?
Okay. Now, each block teaching workshop comprises of 2 full days, from 9 to 5. No, they are back to back. Yes. Yep.
So only 2 days we spend time with them.
Yes. However, you realize that for the level 2 program, right, there would be 2 block teaching. Okay. The reason is because there's 2 assignment that goes along with it as well.
And that one assignment must be submitted within that 6 months period. Everything must be completed within 6 months.
Yes, if you look at the level 2 program, yeah.
No, I'm looking at level 1 because
Level
that is
1,
why-
okay, yeah. Level 1, everything will be completed within 6 months.
And the exam is what? MCQ or?
The exam is actually in essay form, right? Okay, you have to write essay.
How
okay,
long?
Short essay, short
How
essays.
long? How many questions?
Level 1 program, we're looking at 1 hour 45 minutes final examination. But it's an open book
Okay.
exam.
Not to worry, the passing mark is 60%. Suspend.
Okay, now very interesting. The whole idea of open book exam is actually not for you to refer to the materials. You realize that the questions are actually being set in a way to test your understanding, right? Okay, so you can't really copy per se. Huh? Okay,
Sorry, the courses will be specific to industry or overall, like the general one?
okay. Now we are looking perhaps to work together with mums and all that to sort of make it more contextualized, for the money services business, But by and large, what we have together with AICB at the current moment, we do touch, collectively, on the whole, the entire financial services. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Just level 1. Okay. So the level 1 programs now. First of all, we have level 1 for AML, CFT, as well as regulatory compliance. Okay. Level 1, we are looking at people with less than 3 years of experience, right? Okay. As far as now, as far as you don't necessarily need to have a degree, right, in order for you to be able to get in. Okay. Now, level 1 program actually fills up the foundational knowledge. Okay. So that you can move on to level 2 to actually learn to how to apply all these knowledge concepts and put them into practice. All right. Now, for the level 1 program, again, right, let's say you were to start sometime in February, for example, okay? Now, there will be a workshop, okay, in March, okay? And then after the workshop, okay, 2 days of, 2 full days of workshop, right? Sometime in middle of April, all right, or May, you have to submit your assignment. Now, your assignment will make up, 50%, right, of the overall marks, okay, for the qualification, right? And then, comes June, okay, you will sit for the exam in June. Okay, I'm just going through, a typical flow. Sorry? Yes.
Exam will be conducted in Malaysia. We have 4 centers, KL, Penang, Sabah and Sarawak as well. So we cover this region.
Okay, now, very interesting. Now, the assignment, okay, in fact, all the assessment questions, including the final exams, right? Okay, now the questions are being set over in the UK, okay, by ICA and the University of Manchester. Now, your answer booklets, okay, your answers will also be submitted to UK for their marking. Okay, and the marking period for each piece of assessment takes around like 8 weeks. Okay, because they are being marked independently by UK examiners.
The regulatory requirements. And you are saying that the question papers are being set by the UK people.
Yep.
And we are answerable to UK people. Of course, the regulatory requirements here and in UK will be totally different.
Well, to a certain extent, okay, because, both Malaysia and Singapore, right, by historical reasons, okay, by and large, our regulatory and legal system, we follow pretty much on the English common law system, okay. Now, interesting question. Because of the fact that the examiners, all right, we work very closely with CONG, the Compliance Officers Networking Group, okay. So, and, we have a very good record, of running the program for the last 7 years. So don't be surprised, okay, that the British markers, they are very much aware and in tune with Malaysian regulations. Okay? I hope I answered your question. Yep. Okay, sorry, Simon, perhaps you can...
30, 40 pages, 50 pages?
Sorry? Oh, okay. Well, at the certificate level, we are looking at the assignment to be around 2,500 words, okay, which will translate into around like, in terms of A4 paper, about 10 to 13 pages of A4 size. Well, again, very interesting because the examiner, depending on the examiner, you can have a single question but subdivided into different parts. No.
And the results will come before we sit for the exam?
Yes. Yeah. 1 month after, yeah. You mean for the assignment or for the...
No, see, because we want to know where we stand with assignment
Okay.
when we go into the exams.
In fact, no, right? I believe. Yeah. The results will be out together, yeah. Okay. Now, usually what happens is that, because of the marking, it takes about 8 weeks for the assignment, yeah, results to come back to you, okay? And by the time 8 weeks have passed, you realize that you should have taken the exams by then, yeah?
What about is there any additional materials that you give to us to study?
Just to repeat what Rajesh has said, okay. So it covers all the materials, okay. Now these days the materials are all made available online. Most universities are, these days, right, materials are available online. You can study anytime, anywhere, okay, without even bringing books along with you. So long as you have internet access,
Correct. That's right.
Wi-Fi, etc. Yep.
So online materials, study texts, all will be given to you. Yes, correct. 1-year membership, which is membership with AICB, which is 60 ringgit. And then upon completion, you may continue to be a member of AICB. No, actually receipt is free for the first time. If let's say you fail again and then you have to pay, but subject to approval by ICA.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the marking scheme? Berapa mark nak dapat A, nak dapat B plus and all this. And then overall nak pass macam mana?
Okay, now, in terms of the grading scheme, this is, again, because of University of Manchester. So we are following the British grading system, okay? In other words, okay, 70 stands for first class or distinction, okay? Anything, okay, 60 would be merit, right? 50 would be a pass. Yeah, so this is how it works. Okay, now, so far now some of you may want to ask me, right, so what's the percentages of people passing or failing, correct or not? Okay, now, I would say, by and large, in terms of scoring distinction for each cohort, now so far each cohort of candidates that we have over here in Malaysia, last 2 years or so, right, we are looking at maybe around like, for AML, like for example, 80 to 100 packs. Now for each cohort so far, about 15%, it's usually between 10 to 15% would manage to achieve distinction. In other words, first class honors, okay? The bulk of the candidates, right, would somewhat be divided between merit and pass, okay? Now, a handful of them, unfortunately, between 5 to 10% each cohort, okay? You know, I wouldn't say fail, okay? I don't like to use the word fail. I call it deferred success, okay? Deferred success. Now, again, like just what Rajesh has said, right? Because there are different components, right, to the overall assessment. Now, you find that some candidates they couldn't clear, like for example, the assignment, right? Okay, if you couldn't clear the assignment, then what's going to happen is that because we have 2 intakes a year, okay, so you have to take together with the next intake, right, the assignment question, okay, and similarly for the exam, if you know you couldn't make it this time round, okay, you can always do so with the next cohort, all right? So this is how the system works. I hope I answer your question, all right?